Hello and welcome to this video all about surrogacy jargon. We're going to cover a variety of terms today because understanding the world of surrogacy is complicated enough, but it sure does help if you know what the terms mean. So the first word I want to define is surrogacy. What does that mean? So surrogacy is when a person carries a child for another person or couple. This is legal in Canada. There's more than one type. We'll get to that next. But it's when the individual becomes pregnant for the sole purpose of relinquishing the child to another person or couple. So for example, if my sister could not become pregnant for a variety of reasons, there's many reasons that lead people down the path of surrogacy. But if she couldn't become pregnant, she could say to me, Lisa, would you carry my child for me? And her not yet baby, but what would become a baby could be put inside me. I can carry the pregnancy and ultimately say, here's your baby. So sometimes surrogacy is referred to affectionately like being a 9-month babysitter, but it's very different than adoption because the intention for the pregnancy is formed in advance, that this is going to be somebody else's child. And we can leave for other videos why people pursue surrogacy. Today, I'm just going to stick to the jargon. So 2 types of surrogacy, traditional and gestational. Traditional surrogacy is when the surrogate uses her own egg to become pregnant, and gestational surrogacy, the more common type, is when it is not the surrogate's own egg. So to go back to the example, if I were to be a surrogate for my sister, it could be her egg, or any stranger's egg for that matter, can actually be used to create a pregnancy, and that leads us to in vitro fertilization. So how would I become pregnant with somebody else's egg? There's a medical process, in vitro fertilization, known as IVF, a lot of jargon. IVF is when an egg is fertilized outside of the human body. So sperm meets egg outside of the body, and then it's transferred, known as an embryo transfer. It's transferred into the uterus of the surrogate. And so that is how a surrogate can become pregnant. And that's the more common type, gestational surrogacy, is when it is not the surrogate's own genetic material. In Canada, though, both gestational and traditional surrogacy are legal. The last term I want to share with you on this topic is carrier. So gestational carrier means the exact same thing as gestational surrogate. It's when a surrogate is carrying a child for another person or couple, but it is not her ova, her egg. Ova and egg also mean the same thing. Now let's move on to some other language. So there's assisted reproductive technologies. That's an umbrella term that really captures the wide variety of technologies used at fertility clinics. So in vitro fertilization is one that we've covered. Another is artificial insemination, which can happen inside of a clinic or not. And in the case of traditional surrogacy, if a surrogate's using her own egg, sperm can be artificially inseminated. It's not usually necessary to go through the in vitro fertilization process. So artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization are 2 forms of assisted reproductive technologies. So the fancy things that are happening at fertility clinics to help people get pregnant are assisted reproductive technologies, assisting people with reproduction. The last language that I want to share with you, the terminology is intended parents and recipients. So intended parents or parent, so a person can be parent on their own as well, that refers to the individual who's going to be raising the child at the end of the day. So if I was a surrogate for my sister, I'll go back to the same example. My sister would be the intended parent and I would be the surrogate. So after the baby's born, I would say, here's your child, and she's the intended parent. The language of intended parents is also used in the context of gamete donation. So sperm, egg, and embryos can be donated to intended parents. In those cases, there's other terminology. Sometimes those individuals are also referred to as recipients because they are receiving the genetic material. So quick recap, what did we learn? Surrogate is a person who carries a child for someone else. There's traditional, own egg, and gestational, not own egg. We've got assisted reproductive technologies, which can include in vitro fertilization, sperm meets egg outside the body, and artificial insemination. So sperm is put into the woman's body without needing to go through in vitro fertilization. We've got intended parents or parent, people who are going to be raising the kids, and recipients, people who are receiving donated genetic material. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.